Today is day 7 of the August 94 10-day retreat in Springwater. Maybe every talk should start with a question. Where am I? What am I? What's happening right now? Right now, this moment, what's happening? Does the question wake up this mind to listening? Not just the mind listening, but all of oneself open, humming the airplane, buzzing, chirping, cooling, winding, breathing. This body vibrating with all kinds of sensations, energies, which we have learned to label as pain or pleasure, tension. Can it all be here? As one field of perception, open, humming, buzzing, vibrating. And what else is happening? Are there thoughts? Dividing up into this and this and this. This is this and that is that, and I'm not this, I'm that. That's the activity of thought. Parceling out, packaging up, dividing. What is one open happening? In perception, in awareness. Sometimes people say, well, all right, I hear the birds and the crickets, so what? And lingering there is the thought, what shall I do with this? Or is that all? Isn't there something more? Yes, there's more birds. More breathing, more chirping, more buzzing. More cooling and heating. But thought says more. When thought is quiet, and it's just this. But one will respond, thought isn't quiet, so can one listen to thought? Buzzing around, creating. Constantly creating edifices, structures, representations, symbols, systems. Elaborating or maintaining, repairing and maintaining the structure of me, my personality. It's not being condemned if it sounded like that. It was not meant to be. We're observing what's happening, or there is observation. Is there? Interchange the words. If observation is too hard, it feels as though we're a separate observer. Well, that can happen with any word. In listening, is there a separate listener? In feeling, is there a separate feeler? In thinking, is there a separate thinker? A separate experiencer? Separate doer? That's how we think. And because we think this way, we experience it this way. And thinking, experiencing divides, separates, opposes, polarizes. I think we went into it quite thoroughly in a talk, what that separate thinker or doer is. We won't do this right now. If it needs to be brought up, bring it up in a meeting or private or group. But what comes to mind right now is sort of an unfinished question from before the 2 days of break. The last group discussion we had was started out by the question, I don't remember it completely, but is there any benefit from meeting together without structure, without format? I think the whole hour was taken up with discussing in one way or another about meeting together. And what's the purpose of it, if any? Are there any results? Does it help? Does this kind of meeting together, as happens here, have to also be accompanied by silent sitting alone? Because as one person said, I don't recall verbatim, some things need to be looked at and explored, gone into deeply in sitting quietly alone. The group can't do it for me. And the question came up again this morning is, can there be really a depth of meeting in a group? A depth, as the person put it, where we don't try to accommodate each other. But looking together, responding together as intimate friends. And yet not trying to accommodate each other. Can that happen in a group? One has to see. Find out. Meet. So what does happen as we meet together in groups? Even 2 people as a group. 3, 4, 8, now 9 we're here. That's all the room can accommodate. And each one can watch this for herself, himself. If there's space to watch, if there's an interest, not just in the topic that's brought up, and the topic eliciting one's opinions and knowledge and the memory of past experiences to be retold. But is there also an eye and ear on what is going on in oneself? Maybe the self-consciousness, being shy in saying something, afraid one will not put it right, one will be criticized, looked at judgmentally for not being as lucid as someone else, but wanting to be as lucid as someone else, wanting to be more lucid than someone else, wanting to feel heard, feel important. This is not judgment. These are questions thrown out or in to watch. Because this is the multidimensionality of listening, not just listening to what someone says or the birds singing and crickets humming. But is there any attitude inside, shaped by past thoughts and experiences and imagery about oneself? Does this imagery about oneself pressure to talk or to be quiet? Pressure to be heard, pressure to dominate, to be of power. And if so, if that is felt, as a drive to be powerful, to be directing things, this is not the last level to be explored. Why do I want to be powerful? Why do I want to be important? Needed as the air I breathe and the food I eat, the idea that I'm important, accepted, loved, appreciated, respected, or feared. Why? What's underneath it is there? And I don't mean to start analyzing, because sometimes with a question asked in this fertile air of meditation and looking, self-inquiry, it will reveal itself without needing to be intellectually analyzed from knowledge. Feelings of insufficiency may reveal themselves. Deep down, not feeling good enough, and the need to compensate for that, to feel important. It's there for probably all of us, because we were born into what appears as insufficiency, the helpless baby body. Totally dependent, totally malleable, conditionable, given with a powerful capacity to imitate, to accommodate, in order to get protection, food, love. And yet, the tiny one at the feet, or at least waistline of giants, if there wasn't the capacity to think and imagine and record in memory, this wouldn't matter much. I don't think that grown-up robins remember their infancy. Amazing. We watched 3 litters of robins this year under our porch, a very close sight. It's a marvelous thing to follow how in the beginning just 3 open beaks, that's all you see. And then the growing birds, and then finally getting up, emerging out of this tiny nest, 3 big birds. How do they have room in there? Preening themselves. It was very hot. There was probably a lot of bugs on them. Constantly preening and itching if they felt some safety. And the most amazing thing, even though they could already sit on the rim and flap their wings, the mother sensed the danger, we opened the door or something, she would sit on all 3 of them and they disappear in the nest like a magician's hat. And why? Because they're all emptiness, they're all air. They don't take any space. Wonder where the first batch is now. I hope not just eaten up by the hawks and crows. Lots of robins around. Some of them are making it all the time. And they're doing their thing and seem unencumbered by childhood remembrances. How the father disappeared. I can't tell what's father and mother. Sometimes you wonder, are they both still there? When the one that is, which one is it? Does it matter? Does it matter to a baby robin? It doesn't have to identify. It just needs to be fed and flap its wings and clean itself of itchy stuff. They left one after another. The first 2 we didn't see leave at all, but all we saw was that there was one left. I suspect, but this may already be interpretation and projection, that was the one that was squished the most toward the back. But it apparently got enough food to finally get out of the nest, and it was sitting on our white plastic chair, sort of as a middle stage landing, just hovering there. Almost at times like sitting, leaning back. I already began to wonder, should we feed it? Should we give it something to drink? Because the mother seemed to not be anywhere around. Had she forgotten it? Then it was gone. The chair was empty again. So, for a human growing being, stuff gets recorded, impressions, experiences, painful ones, traumatic ones, joyful ones, all gets recorded and remembered, and a network of associations develops in which one memory can trigger. We've been through it many times. Fear, anger, upset, longing, discontent, felt all over the body. And that discontent or agitation wants satisfaction. It wants to have closure, or at least be satisfied or disappear. The body likes to feel in balance, in harmony. And any disharmony is felt as a nuisance or something, to be like the bird preening itself of the itches. And human beings try all kinds of ways to satisfy the organism that is out of balance, aching, paining, angering, fearing. Clinging to the idea of insufficiency, incompleteness, inadequacy. And maybe sometimes in a group discussion, when we talk, that's sort of the preening. trying to feel better about ourselves, or trying to find out more about ourselves. Because one comes upon that possibility that by finding out more about oneself, there can be, at times at least, a dropping of baggage. Not just by finding out about oneself, but finding out in being together that others are not so much different. And the idea that one is the only one who feels this way, who suffers this way, who has cravings of this kind, is not true. We're all in the same way, not content-wise, but process-wise. We all have the same processes of remembering and aching, paining, fearing, desiring, discontenting. And to find out one is not the only one can at least drop that burden of guilt often that one is so odd, so different. Because other things go on in this brain and body. The continuous story weaving about ourselves, our life. A picture story, like a big album with lots of words in it and lots of pictures. Don't want to get too much into the metaphor, because then we think of the metaphor rather than looking directly. How we are attached, hooked into the story of ourselves, identified with it, the firm conviction, this is me. Often enamored with our story, like the Greek demigod Narcissus, who looked into the water and saw this beautiful young lad and fell in love with the reflection. So much in love he couldn't hear the love song of the nymph Echo. Didn't reach him. Trying to kiss the reflection, he fell into the pond and drowned. So we are enamored with our story. Even if we don't like it, even if we hate it, this is our existence. This is what we are. We're hooked on it, defensive of it. And in addition to what goes on internally about it, may find it very pleasurable and gratifying, helpful, relieving, whatever, to share this story with others. The story of my life, and with a receptive and responsive, kindly audience, people who are really listening. Is this listening surrounding one as one retells a part of one's story? Does this help to illuminate what happens and what is happening? That it is a story? The attachment to it, does it illuminate what's going on many levels? Or is it often in the beginning, before one becomes aware of all these other tendencies, just a reinforcement to attaching to it? Enjoying the pleasure of being interesting to oneself and each other. I remember this succinctly from the 1 year that I did psychoanalysis in Switzerland. Someone had talked me into it. You should do that, it's really good for you. And I don't know how much I realized of it at the time, but later on I realized it was a wonderful gratification to be interesting to this very impressive old man who sat behind me. And with that was spawned a need to satisfy him too. Not just to find out, but he seemed interested. I may have projected it, I may not. I wasn't aware of it, but it was going on. Enough aware that it is recalled now, recollected now. Please, I'm not putting down psychotherapy or psychotherapists. I'm just interested in what happens to us, to me, in group encounters. How far does the light go? How far does the awareness and attention reach? And all these multi-layered aspects that we are, or we think we are. And I'm not trying to discourage people from telling what they need to tell, because it is entirely possible that light is shed, awareness is embracing or illuminating the whole thing in oneself and the others. Because what one discovers in oneself, one will no longer castigate or blame in others. There will be an understanding permeating our relationship. If I really thoroughly understand all the different layers of ongoings in meeting together, communicating together, listening to each other. So is there meaning in meeting together in a group? There's meaning in everything. Not meaning in terms of pointing towards something else, but it's happening. And can it happen with attention? Because we're here, aren't we, to learn about ourselves and each other, alone and in relationship. One person, or several people have said, if this quiet sitting and discoveries that happen cannot somehow or other apply or function in the way I live with my family, my workers, my business, my job, what good is it? And yet it's so hard to be aware as we live among each other, because the conditioned ways are so deeply ingrained and so habitual. We're so used to them, so taking them so much for granted, that it's hard but not impossible to become aware of how this shell, this conditioned shell, with a conditioned network of ideas and emotions, functions in relationship. And the beauty of awareness of it is not, okay, then I can change my personality to a better one. This is sort of the habitual greed for the better, for the more. No, to walk and live and respond in awareness of habitual ways, has its own marvelous action. Wisdom, intelligence, love, compassion. It doesn't fuss around with the shell and trying to change it. It allows it to do what it does, but attentively, and that's the change. Doing one thing, one moment attentively is different from doing it in a dream. It cannot help but be different. All the energy of beingness, of here-ness, is also the working, the responding, the listening. In that there is not even room for is there room for the past in that? Of course, the inflections of our voice, but they may change. From gruff, if one hears that one's talking gruffly, and at the same time of hearing that one is talking gruffly, one realizes one doesn't even want to talk gruffly. It just is a habit, because that's what one heard someone else talk like, if they wanted to get through or be heard. Or whatever, all the strands converging in this moment of talking gruffly and hearing it, realizing it's not necessary. It's not, I must change this, but it is necessary. And the voice may change, not being modeled now after someone else, but it has infinite modalities, this voice of ours. In harmony with the whole state of body-mind, the openness, the non-judgmentalness, the lovingness, takes care of the voice, the way of responding. It sort of jumps right over this ingrained and conditioned way of thinking, well, I ought to talk a little bit more kindly. That's what you learn when you're a telephone operator at the AT&T. To talk in a certain way. If you don't, you may not get the job, or you may not keep the job. So, this is the questions come up in a group meeting, all kinds of things going on. All of these different manifestations, 9 manifestations sitting in that little room, manifesting our past conditioning, our past experiences, our needs and drives. And maybe not only that, maybe also some simple, open listening manifesting. Flickering here or there, sustained one place, not sustained another place. The question that has come up, is it possible to sustain awareness in a group? Sometimes people who realize it's impossible don't go to a group again. Sometimes people have told me they've spent the rest of the day mulling over what was said and what one said and what one should have said and shouldn't have said, that one made a fool of oneself, or how foolish the others are. And this is not what I come to retreat for, to spend my time this way. Do it all the time, mulling over things. Here one person said, I just want to spend some time not talking. I haven't done it in ages. Just not to talk at all, except maybe a 10-minute meeting. It's wonderfully healing and and opening thing. So please, I want to make very clear that I'm not having this talk to advertise group meetings, that this is what people should be doing. It's up to each one, and we need to do different things at different times. And it's a very blessed feeling if one knows what one needs to do and doesn't feel pushed. But usually, if it's not an outside push, there are plenty of inside pushes to do or not to do, because of what others think, what I've been told, what is good for me. Wanting to please someone and so forth. But all of it, look at the sun, it shines on everything. Now you could say there's shadow under the trees, under the roofs of houses. So one can't take any metaphor too literally. Although there is a sun, a light that shines without shadow. So, is it possible to sustain awareness really deeply? Not just a surface attention, but depth of awareness while interacting, intercommunicating. It's a question to be tested. Of course, is the depth of awareness there now? And by depth of awareness we mean not the me network in charge. Because when the me network is in charge, perception is distorted. And all the things happen that we talked about, needing to make up for one's feelings of insufficiency, being important, becoming interesting, and so forth. But in the presence of being present at a group meeting, because that's what we're talking about right now, can there be inward listening? To the machinations of the me network, and realize the listening is not of that network, it's free. And there is freedom in listening without the network. One can experience that. Maybe just for moments, really listening without trying to have merits and do something for oneself. Just being there open. And whatever reactions happen, see them. But not the reactions dominating. And as for saying something that one later, when one leaves the meeting, regrets, this mulling over we just mentioned. Is one now caught up in that, or can that be illuminated with awareness as going on, and as going on as the habitual wanting to be something, being afraid of what one is or has been seen as, and allow the listening to be there with the birds and air and crickets. Caw, caw. Learn learning about the power of the power and strength of our urge to be liked and to be respected. Underneath it, the pain of humiliation suffered earlier. And also question it. Maybe one did not make a fool of oneself. Maybe the others have already forgotten, have not marked it down, are not carrying it around. Because in this work of sitting and looking and listening, there is a sort of self-cleansing process going on. Things are dropped quicker and easier than our normal life, where we seem to be nothing but Velcro. Everything sticks, which doesn't have to. You can see in your daily life as well as here, or at least question it. Do I have to carry this around? Do I have to carry the grudge? When we started these group meetings, I was relating it to someone this morning. I was concerned how this would work out. It had been demanded, and by discussing it with whoever was there to discuss, it seemed there was more demand for group meetings than hesitation or outright no. So this is how we've usually operated when not everything that is publicly demanded, but when it seems a reasonable thing and possibly compatible with the work of retreating that all needed to be found out. We went ahead with scheduling group meetings. And I remember one of the first ones where a retreatant was present who I knew was very deeply into her sitting. Very still, quiet person, perceptive and open. And in this group meeting, everything went off. It was an amazing thing. People arguing with each other. Very little listening and learning and looking. I was sort of peeping at her every once in a while, what was going on in her. And the expression did not seem very happy on her face. I wondered, why are we doing this? And where is it going? So then, the next time she came to a private meeting, I was almost bracing myself with expectation of criticism of what we're doing with these retreats. And instead, to my utter amazement, she said, I learned so much. I was so judgmental of everyone that I realized I wasn't listening at all anymore to what people were doing and saying. Just caught up in judgment about others. So, there's no place, no time. That's true. No place, no time where we can learn something. By learning, meaning openly meeting without prejudice, without interpretation. And since so much, particularly toward the end of the retreat, so much concern stirs in retreatants. It's fine to be here, but what when I get back into relationship, into work, into the city, into an unfriendly environment or a hectic, frenetic situation. Will this hold? This quietness is, at least at times, open, vulnerable being. Well, it's possible to test it out right here. Of course, it's not quite the same. Everybody here is sitting quietly most of the time, or walking quietly, sleeping, or working quietly. So it's a very fertile ground for observing what goes on in oneself and each other in relationship. Because this silent energy is palpably here. And since this body is equipped with organs of sensing and hearing and seeing, can this silent energy cleanse these organs to really just hear or see what's there, aware of the tremendous pressure of past imposition, interpreting, judging, wanting to be something. Wanting to make something out of everything, rather than just let it be and let it go, which it does anyways. Only thought carries. The event is long past. So, to the question which was put a couple days ago, should there be a leader in the group or an agenda, somebody, a facilitator? Who's the leader? Who's the facilitator? A role? A job? A training? There are such occasions where leaders are needed or felt to be needed, trained facilitators. But here, if there is clarity, that clarity will speak or not speak. It doesn't matter where it manifests. It doesn't need to be a designated person. And if there's no clarity, then confusion speaks and answers. But confusion speaking, being listened to, the listening to confused expressions, the non-judgmental, open listening may act as a sounding board or mirror to suddenly hear oneself, see oneself in a new light. We will end here for today.